Okay, Joanne Brittner. You don't already know her.
You did say Joanne?
Joanne, Joanne. And I want to thank the Public Safety Citizens Reform Panel for being here tonight and even asking us to come and share. And from the invitation, I chose what do I think could improve policing in Plattsburgh. And I believe defend the Plattsburgh police, not defund, defend. The Plattsburgh Common Council voted for allowing the outgoing defeated mayor, Colin Reed, to go ahead to make cuts in the budget in their September 2020 meeting. The police department is on the chopping block. And I am going to read something from the executive order that was put out that prompted all of this discussion, Executive Order 203, because I was shocked to find that our New York police departments receive minimal, if any, annual training on issues that confront us in society. From the Executive Order 203, annual training on implicit bias awareness training, de-escalation training and practice, law enforcement assisted diversion programs, restorative justice practices, community-based outreach and conflict resolution, problem-oriented policing, hotspots policing, focused deterrence, crime prevention through environmental design, violence prevention and reduction interventions, model policies and guidelines promulgated by the New York State Municipal Police Training Council, and standards promulgated by the New York State Law Enforcement Accreditation Program. They should have annual training, but the process to get it is lengthy and it costs a lot of money. So I'm going to say again, defend the police, provide adequate training and equipment for them to do their jobs. There's not much left to cut in the police department. Currently, the police force has no annual training. Recently, 2 officers for the school system have been cut. Unfilled vacant positions. The officer for the housing authority is on the chopping block. The department has 1 lieutenant, and he's working at City Hall with the mayor. Is the police chief being set up to fail? The most outstanding message in the Executive Order 203, but not listed in our area of consideration. Whereas, recent outpouring of protests and demonstrations, which have been manifested in every area of the state, have illustrated the depth and breadth of the treated equally, fairly, and justly before the law. And whereas Black Lives Matter. Whereas these deaths in New York State include those of Anthony Baez, Amadou Diallo, Osmando Zango, Sean Bell, Ramalari Graham, Patrick Deutschman, Aki Gurley, and Eric Gardner. Amongst others, and in other states, include Oscar Grant, Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, LaQuinn McDonald, Walter Scott, Freddie Gray, Philando Castile, Antoine Rose Jr., Armand Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd, amongst others. The government, in this whereas, the government has a responsibility to ensure that all of the citizens are treated equally, fairly, and justly before the law. So, that's what I had to say.
Thank you so much.
And do you have like clarifying questions or anything you want to pull out from what Don said? Well, I see you look like you're deep to it. Did you have something you wanted to add?
No.
I think just, it's really hard for me to read from here. I think what I heard Joanne a few times was finances. being a huge theme for us.
Huge.
So in relation to the biggest challenges in our area, finances.
And the lack of adequate training.
Finances and training. But I could say at this point, looking at the 203, maybe that the state is looking at it too. Does that mean some could come in from that direction? We don't know, but.
So John, when you call the names of those black man and woman that were killed, what were you thinking? What what did you want to communicate?
What I was thinking is that the state, it's looking at these individuals. They're the ones included in the 203, and that we're recognizing them.
And therefore, should there be something we need to do in Plattsburgh?
Yeah, we need to train our policemen and give them the equipment that they need to do their job. And nothing's even been said about cameras or video. That's so out of.
Especially when dealing with racial minorities or with black folks.
My big problem goes to the mental health and the youth that gets put out into the street. They end their education, they end up in some horrible situation, but we have a whole population draining out. And I'll even go so far as to say, remember in 1930 when Social Security was enacted, because old people were dying in the street. They didn't do it because they wanted us to have money. People were complaining because the elderly and the disabled. And I knew I wouldn't have time to get into all of that. So we fixed it. Well, we may have blown up the Social Security a little bit, but we are taking care of the elderly and the disabled.
Okay.
And now here, we're in 2020, and we got people, young people, youth, out into, whether it's drugs, whether it's with the police, whatever, they're just wasted. I believe we need to start reschooling our education system, and it needs to be done in grade 1. And then redirect them and even create programs that individuals could make incomes of, like vocational training. But that wasn't on my list of things to talk about.
Thank you.
It was rich. Mary, did you want to?
No,
Okay.
just listening.
Oh, good. Thank you.
No words of wisdom, huh?
It's about the only thing that doesn't hurt these days.
Yeah.
Brian?
I feel you, I'm getting old too. Brad Miller, Plattsburgh Police Department. Just want to say hello, Jamie, Bonnie, Will, I haven't met you yet, but I know who you are. Maxine, Dr. Cromwell, and Amanda. So we're going to focus on what are the biggest policing challenges? Is that what we're focusing on?
So I think some people are looking at all
Yeah.
of the questions.
Right.
I'm just putting it wherever it falls.
Okay. Would you like me to address just the first one, or?
And you can, if you want to touch on all of them, or if there's one of them that resonated with you that
Okay.
you wanted to touch on, but I can give you 5 minutes. And you
Okay.
can touch on all of them.
Resonate, that's a good word. I like everything that I do and say, I like it to resonate with the people that I'm addressing. Thank you for the invite. I appreciate you guys bringing the community and have them involved. I'm not only standing here as a public servant, and yes, I did say that, I am a public servant. I'm also I consider myself a social worker in uniform. There are things that you can put a dollar value on, and there are things that you can't. Public safety should not come before politics. Some of the biggest challenges I find being a police officer for 18 and a half years would be staffing is a big issue. No offense to anybody here, but I can honestly say that I probably know more about the police staffing than everyone in this room. We have, and I discussed this in other platforms, we mainly have 3 officers during the day, a supervisor and somebody working the desk, or a police dispatcher. There have been recent talks about cutting from our department in the sum of $500,000, including, which may include all of our police dispatchers. I don't know if everyone is aware that if they remove all of our dispatchers, someone has to work dispatch. We cannot have no one answer the phone. We cannot have no one there when somebody comes into the doorway of the police department and says, I need help. My child has been abused. I've been in a domestic incident. I need help. Can I speak to an officer? If you don't have a dispatcher there, what you're doing is you're taking a police officer off the street and you're putting them behind the desk and answering phones and dispatching calls. So when there's talk about having non-uniformed police officers being dismissed or discarded or let go, you're taking police officers that are in uniform off the streets and you're having them work the desk and answering phone calls. The main line, the emergency 911 line, people that come into the station. I've worked the desk. The dispatchers were furloughed for 3 months. The community center closed. I run the community center downtown. I'm proud to say that I'm a community resource officer. And one of the reasons why I think I got selected for the position is I firmly believe that we need to get away from that warrior mentality and be more of a guardian. And I think if we as police officers can be guardians to the people in our community and build trust and be more engaging and sit down and listen and have open dialogue with people all walks of life. Like, it doesn't matter the color of your skin, your education, your political status, your economic status. That's one of the things that the community center brings, is that open engagement, that open dialogue. I've sat and talked for hours and hours and hours, days and days and weeks upon weeks, into months. This will be starting my 3rd year in a couple weeks, and just remarkable changes that I've seen, not only in the community, but the interaction and relationship between the police and our community. There's 4 words that I have that I put on the front of the community center, and they're very important to me. It's trust, hope, respect, and unity. Those 4 words, you can accomplish anything. Trust, hope, respect, and unity. If you have trust in one another, I know it takes time to build. When you have that trust and that open dialogue, you have hope. When you have hope and trust, you start to respect one another. Once you gain that respect, what happens? You unite. You unify. You become one as a people. So, those words, human decency, need to carry on, not only in our community, but from our department. Human decency. Those 2 words are very important. The staffing is definitely an issue when you're having 3 officers, and just to give you guys an example, we had, within a 20-minute period, 3 mental health calls. 2 were suicidal. One wanted to jump off a bridge, one had a knife, the other one wanted to overdose on medication. Well, if you have 3 officers, and you're supposed to have 2 officers for each mental health crisis, right? That's 6 officers. We don't have that. So you either have to go alone or you have to gather resources from another either department, or hopefully a detective is available and they can come out from what they're doing in their work, or the juvenile officer or something. You're going to have to pull from somewhere else. And this just happened last week. And while we had the 3 people that were in need of mental health treatment, I was in a meeting at the community center. I had to lock up the community center and leave because guess what just came in? A burglary in progress over in public housing. So, you know, I know firsthand how difficult it is to have a lack of resources and not have the manpower and the staffing to be able to do these things. Never mind the things that are desperately needed. And, you know, I'm not here to pat myself on the back, but I think community policing is needed. I think that having police engagement with the community, because you think about every time that somebody interacts with a police officer, what do you think of? You think of a traffic stop, you get pulled over, right? And you could be scared to death. If you're a person of color and you're not from the area or you're from the area, you're even more scared. Because how is that officer going to react to you? You know, you don't know until you have that interaction. You have domestic violence and burglaries and child abuse and suicides and overdoses, and I can go on and on and on about police contact, and everything is negative. Think about it.
May I ask, does anybody want to ask a clarifying question? Because you said something interesting, that very often people may have, officers may have to go on a call by themselves,
Mm-hmm.
right? Do we have body cameras?
And we don't.
So that also sort of like sets up an issue for accountability
Mm-hmm.
and for, you know, who experiences what,
Right.
who's able to prove what.
Right. And I know when I go to a call, I know that I can be held accountable for my own actions because I'm not worried about what I'm doing or what I'm saying. Yes, if you have it recorded, then others can know. But I know in my mind and my heart, when I respond to a call, I'm looking out for their safety and then mine.
Right.
It's not doing something illegal, or it's taking care of people. It's, you know, doing the right thing.
In the perfect world, but things
Right.
things can
Right,
happen.
things, yeah,
But I was
and,
thinking, as you were saying, if you don't have the resources.
right, we actually
it
did,
sets you- It puts you in a place for having to respond to calls sometimes by yourself.
right.
Where it sounds as though you're saying that the protocol is to have more than one person.
Well, you should on certain calls, but there are times that we
You
don't have those
that
resources.
because of the
Correct.
resources.
You know, when you talk about somebody, mental health call, or somebody's suicidal and they have a knife, do you want one officer to go by themselves? If you have somebody that's under the influence of unknown substance, let's say PCP, where you have the strength of 10 men, do you want one officer going, whether male or female?
And are there points when that does happen?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Tasers don't mean a thing if you've got somebody on PCP.
Sometimes the tasers don't work, sometimes, you know, they might not hit where they're supposed to hit.
So that
Some,
can lead to other consequences for the officers and for the
Yes.
person that we're serving. So that definitely sounds like a challenge.
it is a challenge, and I can tell you that in 18 and a half years, although I'm equipped and trained with pepper spray, I've never used it on anybody because I like to talk to people. I like to take the time to de-escalate, to defuse. Not a lot of people can say that.
And those are sort of like unintended consequences of not having the resources.
Yes.
Because we're human.
Yes. But being able to talk to people is a skill set, right? Not everybody can do it.
Right.
But then we get down to training. You have resources and then you have training. I think there should be more training on mental health, on addiction, and on diversity. I don't know if you know, Dr. Cromwell was on the Link Steering Committee for Diversity and Inclusion, which I was proud to be asked to be on that panel. Maxine, I've seen you there several times and interacting with one another. I'm also a recovery coach. I'm the only and first and only police officer that is certified to be a recovery coach to help people with addiction and mental illness. That has never been done before. That, maybe we need more training like that so officers can be trained by people that are non-law enforcement.
And I was just gonna ask the question, because by you saying that, it sort of like sparked something that John said earlier on. Do we have a lot of training right now for our police department around issues of implicit bias, systemic racism?
No, and I think in the academy, they don't train you to be racist. I was a new recruit. I had a field training officer, I had several of them, and not one told me to point somebody out or to pull them over because of the color of their skin. I am now a field training officer. I've been one for a decade, and I would not train anybody to, point somebody out because of this color of skin. A violation that may have occurred in the vehicle, or maybe a complaint or an investigation that we have to go to, and we don't know who's on the other side yet. But I haven't seen that type of trainer behavior.
Right, so you talk about nobody trains you to be racist, right?
Right.
But also, is somebody training you to be anti-racist?
I think that there should be some training with diversity. I'm fortunate because I grew up on a military base, so there were times where I was the minority. So I feel privileged that I'm more diverse than maybe somebody that was born and raised up in Plattsburgh.
Yeah, so Bonnie, I just want to point out that it sounds as though one of the challenges, or one of the things that we can think about to improve our department is by, so you specifically talk about, we can talk about implicit bias. And implicit bias touches on all the range of the human experiences, all the forms of identity.
That's an opportunity to improve policing.
Right, but you specifically talked about, as you said, nobody teaches you to be racist.
Well,
But nobody also teaches you
society
to be.
does.
But nobody teaches you, well, intentionally, sometimes some people. do.
It's not in a curriculum for a police academy
No, I know.
to teach
I know that.
racism.
So let me just
personally-
finish the point. So I think what I'm hearing you saying is that nobody's intentionally teaching you to be anti-racist. So I think we need to add that as something that can improve policing. So specific anti-racism training.
And I think to be more specific than that is that, I think people in uniform and who may be white Anglo-Saxon, if they have this reason to believe that they shouldn't see color, I think it's wrong. I think we should see color. I think we should, when we pull somebody over, there might be a situation that they may have been in involving the police. So I should see that. I should see that maybe they've had a bad experience.
And part of the anti-racism training teaches you to be able to understand the experiences of the other.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think I exceeded my 5 minutes. I apologize.
You did.
I know it's time to go. Can I just say one more thing? Air Force brat. But I think that as a city, we need to, we get defensive and we say that we're not a racist town, but people's experiences are very different than that. And if you know people of color, Black people, brown people in Plattsburgh, they do have lots of bad experiences. I happen to work at the college, so if you talk to students when they walk downtown, or their experience is very, very different than mine, having been raised on the Air Force Base and transplanted here. So I think that that's something that we need to acknowledge as a community, and we need to deal with it and not get so defensive about. The fact that I personally might not be racist does not mean that we don't live in a place where racist things happen. And I think that, you know, it's one of those things that we just have to deal with as a community. Our diversity is so sparse since the base left, which was, you know, awful, because so many people came from not just different racial backgrounds, but different experiences and different travel and living in different countries. And it added so much diversity to Plattsburgh, and we've lost that. And we have the college, but a lot of students do not feel safe leaving the campus and going to things in town. So I think we need to acknowledge that, figure out a way to deal with it as a community. And I understand, I feel, you know, I love Plattsburgh, I grew up here, but saying that we're not racist isn't true. People have racist experiences here, and you need to, if you feel that it doesn't happen, you need to get out and meet some people and talk to some people, because they do have very different experience than perhaps I have.
Thank you.
Thanks, Teresa.
Is it time up for this group? Because I
Yes.
think I'm done listening.
Yes.
I wanted to make a comment.
Good.
Should I wait?
No, this is the time, because it's upon the.
I didn't know if there's someone who's.
There are only two in the next group who have appeared,
Okay.
so.
My name is Mary Krakowski, and I'm a person who lives in the city of Plattsburgh. And listening to the comments of mental health, I can't keep my mouth shut any longer.
Of course. She's a professional mental health person.
Well, you know, every one of them that has spoken is right on the number. And Maxine, Amanda, we've worked together for years with mental health.
Right.
But the one thing I haven't heard anybody say is the numbers are far exceed what they did from years past. And we're seeing it much more so now that we have the substance abuse in our community. Jamie sees it on the drug courts, the mental health courts. The numbers far exceed what I saw years ago. And I worked for 45 years at the local hospital as a director of a department of psychiatry for the adult unit and also the child adolescent unit. And I can support Officer Miller's resource officer position to the 100th degree, because most of the kids that we had on that unit had some interaction with the resource officer, and you'd say, who is the positive in your life? And that was our answer. It was a resource officer in school. So to me, that was very important. Also, the other comment I want to make, and people haven't brought this up, people with mental illness and substance abuse, when they lose control, the power that they have far exceeds anything any one of you have probably ever seen. I used to travel with the police before we had an adult unit to St. Lawrence Psychiatric Center when patients had to go there and kids had to go there. And I was very fortunate that it was a police officer who was transporting me with that child, because they are way out of control. And it was 2 officers who had to control them. So I hope the committees take all this stuff into consideration. You know, body cams are wonderful, but you need more than one officer when you're responding to a violent situation. Yeah. Just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary.
Since we only have 2 for the next group, we want to invite them in, allow them, and if anybody from here wants to stay.
Yeah, they've only got, because we're almost
You know?
at 20 of 5,
Just
so
a
they've
thought,
only
since
got
there's
20
only-
minutes anyway.
Good idea, if anybody wants to stay and talk more
Yeah.
and listen more, I could just a thought.
Because if they come at 5, the 2 that's here can already be done.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
You know what I mean?
yeah, the 4:30 V is
I don't know if
out
anybody
there,
wants
it's only
to.
2 people.
And for everybody's, sorry, I don't know. Yeah, thank you. No problem.
I just came here from work, but I wanted to make it here. I don't want to stay if people might think that it's either an intimidating thing. So I could give people their space and let them speak without having somebody in uniform. So I would love to stay, and if you guys want to come down to the community center and have coffee or have some water, you guys are all invited. Just no drugs and alcohol. I can have music and I can
Thanks,
throw a
Brad.
party.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brett.
That's the point, because he can understand the elephant in the room. He can understand the elephant in the room. We know that.
Right, he is so sensitive. He is, I've been known him since he was that tall. We were all in the military together.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, his mom and his dad and my husband.
You was in military?
Hmm?
You was in military? You said you was in military?
My husband.
Oh.
And we travel around, but Brad and his parents were also in the military at the same time we were.
Okay.
So it's interesting that. And obviously can go to. Right, I mean, I don't know, there's.
No backup for them.
A lot of, yeah.
Dangerous.
I know like the state police join very responsible things, and they care about your.
And that's what I'm saying about, that is dangerous.
It is, it's very dangerous for them. And all dispatch has been moved to Essex County. So that's why they have
Oh, I
to.
had it at the same time. Oh, I have to introduce myself here. We should have it on a loop. Good afternoon, everyone. So for those of you that don't know me, I'm Michelle Cromwell. I'm here as Citizen Cromwell, and to just invite you to conversation about some of the work that we're doing, but for you to also help us to understand your perspective about these 4 questions that we presented to you. The panel is not here to necessarily respond. We're really here to listen, to understand. So I think some of you may have the flyers with the questions. All right, I have.
Here's one.
It's over there.
Yeah, they're sitting on a seat over there.
Okay.
Yeah, they're on the seat. Perfect.
We got 2 more.
What time for Amanda?
This one, so 5 to 10. 5 to 10, we're 10 minutes.
So we'd like to invite you to share your perspectives, to share your thoughts, your ideas, your sentiments, and maybe if each person can take 5 minutes. And as I said, we're not here to respond, we're really here to listen to understand. So why don't we open the floor to anyone that wants to share? And you can either speak to one of the questions, or you can speak to them in total. You want to go first?
I'm going to see how this works.
And you can show us how it works.
I don't know yet.
It's super informal.
Yeah.
It's an opportunity to share your experiences and some of your opinions.
I'll wander my way forward. My name is Ben Wright. I work at the college, actually with Michelle. I'm here.
And what is your name?
Ben.
Ben Wright.
Ben Wright.
Yep.
I've seen this.
Well, I guess, I don't know how well I could speak directly to these questions because they look to me as if they would require a lot more knowledge, in-depth knowledge of how the police department functions. He's not in here.
So based on your experience, because this is about your experiences and your perception.
Well, I can say, I mean, I'll speak to this as I can, but then I guess I had sort of some other thoughts that I came in. I hadn't seen these actual questions, but, you know, my experiences with the Plattsburgh police has been generally strong. I mean, I find them to be receptive and helpful. I have, in my old neighborhood on Champlain Street, I had the local number on speed dial because of the number of domestic disputes in the area. And so I'd say that's a big challenge. Clearly, to me, people are a problem for police. I mean, we do wacky things, and people obviously abuse drugs and alcohol, and there's mental health, mental illness. I've come to lately think that there is no evil. There's no, I just use a bad word here. There's no, we'll say, jerky people. There's mentally ill people, and we're all on a reference from that. You know, the idea being that people are social beings and they want to be social when functioning normally. But some people can't do that, and they need help with that. And the police are not trained to do that. If I could have my way, I would say that every police officer would have at least a master's, if not a doctorate in sociology, in psychology, in medical field. I mean, their job is so incredibly complex that I guess I would say that the biggest problem facing police in general is that it's untenable. Like, they can't do what they're supposed to do. They can't prevent society from doing the many things that they want to do. For example, prostitution, drug use, you know, there's a market for that. And the police have one way to stop it, and that's usually not a pretty scene. So I think decriminalizing a lot of things is critical for any police department. One issue I have kind of had with police is that there is not a sense of I would say privacy, but that's not the right word. So when I've had to report things before, police have come to my door to ask me where exactly it was, you know, or while they're interviewing the people, another one will come to my door. So my neighborhood knows it's me. I mean, the people that I just called them on, they know it's me. And I have to give my name. So that sense of anonymity, I think, would be helpful if I was, you know, to be encouraged to call them more often.
Is it that they haven't exercised more discretion, or?
Well, yeah, I think discretion, and frankly, you know, I don't necessarily need my neighbor to know that I called the police on them. I mean, that's not going to help me in the future, I don't believe. I mean,
So the that one,
yeah, anonymity.
anonymity.
Yeah.
So that's what you want.
Yeah, I think that would be helpful, and I've seen that come up somewhere in discussions about community policing. You know, I think that is a problem, and I think that police in the community is brilliant, and they should be handing out their cards. And how many protests would have been changed simply if, don't let me go over, jump on. How many protests that turned violent could have been changed if the police simply mingled with the protesters, gave out their cards, talked to the protesters. God forbid they even took a knee. I mean, that has happened in places, and it's an incredible moment when police acknowledge, yeah, you're pissed off, and you should be pissed off. And as a fellow human being, I feel your pain. So I think police are put in a category of other. Maybe like people who get abused by police, you know. So I'm gonna wrap up. But I wanted to add a couple of things. One is that I'm going to personally refer to it now as reimagine the police instead of defund the police, because reimagine. Yeah, because I think that, well, there's obviously these problems with the terminology for defund the police. It's a wall to people, to some people who don't understand. And then as part of that, I think it's important in the conversation, you know, I believe that police are not the problem, okay? Society is the problem. The police are in the position of of making the problem incredibly visible. And when I say that, it's really important to me personally that people understand, especially people of color, that I'm not by any means trying to minimize the absolutely horrendous things the police have done to other people. It's not okay at all. I think that they are a product of our society, and their biases become so obvious when they have a gun behind them and they have the authority to be judge, juror, and executioner. And I know it's a tough job, and sometimes, you know, at the end of the day, they want to get home alive. But I think it's critical that we remember that the police officers are people too. And they have families too, and they have problems too. And in fact, I think they probably generally have, I don't know if this is true statistically, but I would imagine it is, you know, higher rates of drug abuse in police families, higher rates of domestic violence. And as we reimagine the police, I would like to, I think we'll get further in the conversation if we can acknowledge that this is a win for everybody. This needs to be a win for everybody. And I guess that's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey. Okay, first off, so far I've seen a lot of changes with the city police since June 6, 2020, since we had that big protest. The reason why I did that protest was to start open communications, open doors with the police department, where we all could start talking and getting things together. And I saw something today that I just started helping people out. I had my first mental health case today, and I didn't know what to do with this person at first. So I ended up messaging the officer on my phone and messaged me back, and he guided me through some of the stuff that I could take the steps to help this person out. So that was a big step, being talking to him, and this gentleman met the officer before, and he asked me to bring him down to the community center, that he wanted to speak to this officer. He did not want to go to the hospital. And that told me, him being a black gentleman that was scared of cops before, that shows me something that one of these officers must build trust with him really good. Instead of him going to the hospital, he wanted to go see this person. But this person was in training. So I promised him that I would take him down next time to meet with him. So this guy had a little bit of mental illness again. And he goes, well, you promised me you would take me to go see the chief. Well, the chief was busy. So I was running out of options with this person. So Brad goes, take me to go get something to eat. So I finally took him to get something to eat. I convinced him to go to the hospital with me. That would introduce you to, well, go to the community center when you get out. You'll go meet the chief when you're done. So to me, that's starting to build some trust. That's something that we need all to work on, especially us African Americans. We need to start opening our eyes and stop going around telling everybody that the police are bad. I'm at a grocery store one day with my wife. The girl couldn't be no more than 6 years old. The girl was acting up. The mother says, keep it up, I'll call the cops, you'll go to jail. Another lady looked at her too and just shook her head. I wanted to say something. I didn't care what color the kid was, but the child was black. Now, what is that going to make the child fear when they get older? Okay? I'm going to be very blunt. I had some people on the safety panel that have messaged me stuff. Okay? What they message me is not good. Okay? It's trying to divide people again. And I will not, no, I have showed the chief some of these messages. And I just want to make it clear, the ones that know who I'm talking about, stop. I'm not here, okay, to divide people. I am here to try to build a community again and build trust with the police. I'm 48 years old. I should not be talking with the Chief Levi. I should not be talking to Brad Miller. I should be out there fighting against the police. I'm here Thursday nights fighting for the police to get money for the budget. Why? They need mental health training, okay? They want to take money from the police. I want to have these officers have more money, train, so we can feel safer on the streets, learn and talk to us black people, okay? There's a lot more that they could do for us, okay? Our biggest issue right now, and I'll keep repeating it till the day I die, is we got to stop focusing outside the city. We need to focus on what's going on in our community, because what's going on in Rochester, New York City, those are totally different areas, okay? That's how I look at it. We need to focus on how our cops are out here. And I believe that our cops are a lot better than a lot of cities I've been to, okay? And that's my biggest thing, that I feel we could do a lot better. But dividing people is awful. I talked to the cops, I seen how they started reacting with us. I feel a lot better how they talk to us like we're people, Before it felt like you're a little sketchy, but I could hear a lot of people thinking, we need to defund the police, we need to defund the police. I tell people to look a little bit more about defunding the police, read a little more about it. And yes, Thursday meeting, I let them know how I felt. No, I was not angry. Okay, I was very passionate about what I fight for, and that's how I get like that. And I explained to the chief that we need to figure out how to do something like we have the community center downtown. That's like a bigger source for me. Brad Miller will tell you how many people actually brought down there that are not comfortable with the police, and bring them down and makes them feel more comfortable. So I think we need more things like that, more interactions with the police, meeting with people outside, and not just the black people. You got the white people that are scared of cops too. So I think more community policing would be great. But my biggest thing is the mental health thing. That it's just, I just can't imagine some of what these officers go through. My neighbor upstairs, I came home, she was crying in my hallway. I didn't know what happened. I go, are you okay? She goes, my brother killed himself on Hamilton Street. I was like, wow. And she goes, I'm not getting no answers from the detective. Find out the detective was working out, but he was off for a few days. I go, you know what? I know somebody that'll talk to you to calm you down. He's off duty, okay? He did not have to answer my phone call to talk to my neighbor, to let her know that everything's gonna be okay. That's what I like to see, okay? He took the time to talk to this person, let her know it's gonna be okay. It really hurts, so I'm not gonna say, like they say, all cops are bad. I don't care anymore. We're gonna fix the system. It's gonna take a group of us to do it, black and white. But our biggest thing is we gotta get rid of this divide and hatred against each other, or we're never gonna get anywhere. And I hope you guys fight to help the cops get some money so we can fix the system. Because it's not just our fault. It's all of our fault. We let it go this far. So I'm not gonna sit there and blame this person like I did before. It took me a long time to think about this. And thank you.
My name is Denise Dufree, and I have a couple, I think, unique perspectives to bring because I work locally for the hospital. My husband works locally for the sheriff's department, and I've lived all over the world, not just in the United States, but a lot of places. And I apologize, I don't know his name, but he touched on a lot of the same things that I wanted to discuss, is that taking the resource officers out of the schools, I think is terrible. Terrible, terrible, terrible. Whether it's a money problem or those kids need that structure, they need that safety net. The students want them there. It's not the first thing they see when they walk in the door is a uniformed police officer. They're not scared of them. They know that they're there to help them. A lot of kids can't go to their parents, their teachers. They feel the officer is there to help them. So having 3 children that graduated from Beekmantown, I know that they loved their officer, Hilliker, who's since retired. One of the other things, again, working in the hospital, we get a lot of mental health patients in our hospital, and they come from a lot of different, whether they're addicts, whether they have mental disease or defect from simple, well, it's never simple, but for genetic reasons or whatever. we don't have enough police officers on the street to accommodate them. One officer going on a call for a mental health patient is dangerous for that person and the officer. So dangerous. It's unpredictable for both of them. The fact that we have, I think the drugs are slowly coming down, but we have petty crime that could be curbed, I think, with education and community policing to help them understand the effects that when you steal from your neighbors, they're not going to be inclined to help you any other time. And the hatred that people have, like he was saying, the hatred for each other. If you don't, little kids are not born with hate in them. They're taught hate. They're not, you can see, like in the animal kingdom, they are always like, oh, the unlikely pair of friends, a tiger and a dog. Well, people can be like that too. You're not born to dislike anybody. You're taught to dislike people. There's a huge difference. And I think education, and that's one of the reasons why you need the resource officers, because they can show the differences. I think having the community center, bringing different groups of people together, whether it be different male, female, blacks, whites, Indians, people from islands, from wherever. I work in the hospital. We have a lot of different types of people that work there. And again, I've lived in a lot of places. You can see the diversity, and people just work well together when they understand they have the same goal. So I think education, especially for our police officers on mental health, could make a huge difference, And keeping funding and filling their positions within the police department so that you can send 2 people on a domestic violence call. Again, those are so unpredictable. We don't live, thank God, in a large city where they have domestic calls one way after another where people are held hostages or worse things happen. But we don't want to become that city either, We don't need to be looking at the larger cities or cities that are not us. Again, we need to focus on our own community and get our own community right and not worry about what the outside does. We need to worry about what our own community does. So honestly, I think mental health education for all of our officers should be mandatory, always. Empathy for different people. When officers go on a call, and I know that they see a lot of the same, we call them frequent flyers at the hospital, they get the same type of calls frequently for the same people. Get out of that cycle. Find a way to break that cycle. There has to be a way to break that cycle. They're just, whether you're moving them out of that environment or you're helping them attain something that they need to get out of that environment so they don't have the frequent flyer calls. That's a huge thing in I think in this area, only because we don't have the financial, not everybody has financial resources that their neighbor does. So I think that that is huge. Other than that, I think having the community center downtown, having Brad there, is a huge positive note for our community. I know my grandchildren have been there. They think having a police officer in town is fun, cool. They respect him. And if we teach our children young, they have good interactions with the police, they're gonna grow up and continue to have good reactions and have good, hopefully strong feelings about the police and not be like that mother, oh, I'm gonna call the police on you and send you to jail. That's terrible. That's terrible, terrible. So, that's it. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I missed your name, I'm sorry.
Denise Dupree.
Dupree, okay.
Yep.
I do have one just quick kind of, so you talk about, you use empathy, and I kind of use empathy and compassion a little interchangeably, I guess, sometimes. And when you talk about the frequent flyers, I've had a lot of those experiences as well. So are you saying in those experiences that we often maybe lose empathy and compassion?
I think so, because even with myself working at the hospital, you see the same people come in. And just for instance, you have a diabetic who comes in with a 500 blood sugar. That diabetic knows they're not supposed to stay home and eat cake and ice cream, but they do. So they end up getting an ambulance ride to the ER, and that's their 3rd one this week. So we see them every single day, police officers, I think, become immune to some of those things. Oh, well, this person, they're having a domestic abuse again because their husband came home drunk and she won't file a report. We take her to the shelter every other day and she keeps going back to him. So they kind of lose the empathy for that person when they should be like, okay, let's find a way to break that cycle.
So along that same line, so one of our other questions is improving policing in Plattsburgh. So do you have any thoughts around improving compassion and empathy when an officer has those interactions over and over again and they become in that mindset of this person's a frequent flyer?
I think for officers, and let me just state, I can only, from my own personal experience, is that when I leave the hospital, I leave my job there. I don't bring it home with me. I don't bring patients home with me because some of that stuff will eat you alive otherwise. And so I think that police officers have to learn to go in and do their job to the very best of their ability without being judgmental before they get there. Because they know what they're walking into when they've walked to the same scene 3 times in a week. You know what I mean? And it's human nature to become frustrated. But we also have to teach them to understand that that person may not be ready to move it out of that situation. We just have to reinforce that we're here for them and not... I think education and peer review would be good because some people are better at decompressing than others. So maybe having officers have some type of downtime, learning, something to give them the time to decompress from situations so that they don't become desensitized to things. Because when you rush into something, you have to be clear of all your faculties, but you also have to not be, there's a fine line, it's really hard. It's like when I run a code, okay, you run a code and you are there, you want to get everything done, but you need to remember that's the person that you're doing the code on. And who's watching behind you because their family member may be behind you seeing what you're doing. They don't necessarily understand what tasks you're doing, but they know that you're trying to help their family member. So it's kind of hard to explain, but giving them...
Are you saying self-care?
Yeah. I mean, self-care would be perfect, absolutely.
Well, and how about therapy? I mean, police need to have access to therapists.
Yeah.
They need psychologists.
Well, I was just gonna say, having access is different than actually accessing it.
Yes, yeah.
And that's the conversation we wanted.
Yeah.
Right,
Exactly.
I mean,
That's why I asked.
I was gonna say, I know with my health insurance and some other programs through the county, like, because of where I work, where my husband works, we have 8 free sessions with mental health. So I can call any therapist I want and say, hey, I work for so-and-so, they'll give me 8 free sessions a year.
Right.
Maybe officers, I don't know what their health insurance or what, but maybe that's something that they can have and not have to do it on their downtime. That's the other thing, is like, I do it on my downtime, but they want to do other things with their family because they miss a lot of things. Certain people who are essential workers, they don't get Christmases off, they don't get birthdays off, they don't get 4th of July off. They go to work, 10 days in a row because they're mandated to do it because they don't have enough staff. So being able to do it and be paid for it, do it and then on the clock, they're more apt to do it because they don't have to make time in their private lives for it and take away from their own family. I think is probably one of the best ways to go about that.
And I think you're also talking about things that can just wear on a human being.
Exactly. They have a stressful job.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for, some things are just, like, everybody's different. So some people handle it better and can go play a basketball game after work and they're fine. The rest of the day is gone. But not everybody is like that. Some people are just very empathetic and it sticks with them even though they don't want it to, it still does.
And some of them might get numb.
Exactly.
And Bonnie, I was saying that you talked about accessing, right? Accessibility and accessing. I can't remember the terms we use, but I think it's important for us to add that as one of the things that can improve.
Use the EAP.
Yeah.
They got it.
Right. So they have access to it, but as if they actually use it.
Right.
Well, again, and that's why I'm saying is like, if they have to do it on their downtime, more people they are not apt to do it because they want to use their downtime as time with their families.
Yeah.
But in order for them to continue to do their job and be good at their job, it's like training. They have to have that self-care. Absolutely.
It almost works as an incentive then, if they're doing it on the clock.
Exactly.
But
Like,
otherwise, there should
when
be a
I-
disincentive.
When I go and do my CPR training, I'm on the clock. To get my TB shot, I'm on the clock. So I'm never not paid for it.
EAP is not, we have EAP at the college,
Well, you say, okay, go ahead.
so maybe it's a different program, but my.
Yeah, it is
EAP
very different. It's a
is
full service EAP.
Limited and not helpful.
Well-
I had not good luck with EAP.
Ours is good.
Yes, we've got them, we've got 135 other organizations in the tri-county
Well, that's what I said, I'm
area.
not quite sure what they have available or what's
Yeah,
offered to them.
that's okay.
But make sure they have something that is,
Well,
Right, and I think that's the point that Bonnie was making,
Yeah.
providing access, but then ensuring that people are accessing.
so the
exactly,
point
yes,
is
yes.
on work time. That's
Yeah.
Yeah,
the
they can go see a therapist, right?
So that's it, so
Yeah.
it's access, but then we also have to maybe have something maybe mandated that they have
I'm
to
just saying, because I
access.
know I talked to some officers, like they said before, it's easier for them to talk among themselves sometimes than to talk, because they know each other very well.
Group therapy.
Well,
Very
it's-
helpful.
I mean, they should have that once a month, have a group therapy, sit down together.
In the office, on the doctor. So I'm
Oh,
so
sorry.
sorry, but there was actually, the probably most important thing I didn't say in terms of building empathy and compassion
Yeah,
is anti-racism training, critical race theory classes. I mean, I have found
there we go.
that kind of work to be energetic, inspiring, and again, it's a huge empathy builder.
Yep.
Well, when you were talking about, them getting numb or burned out, if we take away positions or we don't fill positions that are empty, then the police officers that we have on duty now will have to continue to work, possibly have overtime, because they can't just go home when their shift is over if there's nobody coming in after them. So when we have good police officers, what's gonna happen when they get burned out? They're not gonna wanna come to work. Our good police officers are not gonna be here. And one bad apple does not make a whole barrel bad.
And I think Denise, before you came in, that was one of the things that we were talking about, and that ties into resources too. So we don't have the resources, we don't have as many officers, so it's this cycle.
It is, it's a big vicious cycle.
But just wanting to shift the trend a bit, other people waiting outside to come in?
So
This
it
one
looks
gentleman
like,
here.
it looks like, session B, people you can stay, session B can stay. Session C, it looks like some of you guys have come in already,
Okay.
which is fine. So we're gonna continue the dialogue, so we're gonna start back from the beginning for a second, and Michelle has asked me to kind of to take over at this point in time. So my name's Amanda Buller-Salin, and I'm also a panel member, and today we're here to have, most of you have sat in on the conversation. I'm not gonna waste time talking more about what we're doing. Today we're talking about some of the biggest challenges in policing, some of the current strengths, weaknesses, if you have any suggestions regarding improvement. And we're giving people an opportunity to stand up to the podium, share your ideas, your concerns, and so forth, and have some dialogue. So if anybody who hasn't had an opportunity would like to come up, we'd love to hear from you.
Hello. First of all, I want to thank you guys all for what you're doing here. I think it's really awesome that you're taking the time out of your, I'm sure, busy lives to do this, so thank you all. My name is Jen Harrison. I was raised in Clinton County, and I have been a resident of the city since 2013. My perspective it seems like the biggest challenges that face our police department are community, transparency, and budgeting. I feel like these are all currently intertwined. When you listen to the public comments in the public hearings, there are a lot of people voicing concern over the proposed budget. Many, not all of these comments come across as uninformed and sometimes a bit alarmist. On the other hand, I know people who have had conversations directly with police officers, and they talk about their staffing needs, and the concerns seem legitimate and they seem thoughtful. As a resident that is trying her best to stay informed and educated on all of the issues facing our community, I am finding it pretty difficult to find concrete facts that lead me to make truly informed decisions. What are the actual staffing needs? What do other cities do to transition from retired cops to new cops? And how do they do it without adverse effects for the city safety and also the city budget? If the police department is understaffed, then why are they sending police officers to a closed city beach on a regular basis? These are questions that I have that I would love to get the answers to, but I honestly do not know how to find these answers. If the police department is understaffed, if the police department is truly understaffed to an extent that it would affect our public safety, how can they communicate that in a manner that the general public understands that? I feel like I'm doing everything I can to find everything out, and I still don't feel like I have all of the parts to the puzzle to say this is exactly how I feel. So that's kind of where I'm at in regards to the kind of puzzle of transparency, communication, and said budget. As far as the role of police and community, I didn't hear much of what happened prior, so I feel like I might be a little bit of a outlier, but we'll see. The advocacy toolkit for community policing available on obama.org states the following: proactive policing creates a culture that positions officers as warriors who enforce the law rather than as guardians of public safety. A warrior can be defined as a person who is engaged in some struggle or conflict. A guardian can be defined as a defender, protector, or keeper. This is a simple but stark contrast. This difference between warrior and guardian makes me think of a city event a few years ago. I don't remember if it was Mayor's Cup or 4th of July, but my family and I walked downtown and we were greeted by police officers in riot gear and some sort of warlike vehicle. These were warriors. These were not guardians.
And this was in Plattsburgh?
Yes. I don't remember which event it was. They're so close together, but it was not the normal city police guard. It was what I would interpret as riot gear. Police officers should be among the citizens, saying hello, having conversations, getting to know the people they are protecting. When my 4-year-old son waves at a police officer, which happens almost every time we pass a cop car on a walk, the police officer should wave back. Unfortunately, that happens way less often than you would think. He's obsessed with Paw Patrol, so he idolizes the police. And he says they save the day, which in many cases they do. But as we were saying, someone said earlier, they're very impressionable, and I just want a police officer to say hello to my son. And that's an outlier. I'm sure there are many that will, but that hasn't been my experience so far. So in regards to the role of police, I want to quote the ACLU. We need to fundamentally change the role of police in our society. That role has to be smaller, more circumscribed, and less funded with taxpayer dollars. Money saved from reducing the size and the scope of the police has to be reinvested in the community-based services that are better suited to respond to actual community needs. So I heard in comments at recent public hearings, people who are in support of the police who have responded to someone in crisis. This is often mental or substance use related that they were referring to. And I certainly commend and respect the police for the work that they do in these situations. However, I believe that health professionals, not police officers, should be the ones to respond in these crises. Now, if the person is a danger to themselves or to others, obviously police should be involved, but I believe that it should be a partnership and that there should still be some sort of health professional involved. And then my follow-up question to that would be, what community-based services can we provide to prevent the crisis in the first place? In regards to school resource officers, I do not believe that police have a place in our schools. I have heard some very positive stories from school teachers about the role of school resource officers, and obviously some other parents have had very positive experiences. But from what I'm hearing, the impact was not necessarily made because they were a uniformed officer. It seemed to me that it was more because they were present, they were aware of the student's personal challenges, and they were advocating and holding that student accountable. These are all things that could be done by specific staff members trained in mental health intervention, maintaining a positive school environment, and encouraging healthy behaviors. They have all sorts of names out there, but that is what I would prefer to see in a school that my son is attending. These things are, yeah, so the last thing that I want to add is in regards to accountability. I would like to share my support and encourage the creation of a civilian oversight board. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any clarifying questions? Anybody else? David, you have 2 seconds.
Yeah, I just like to say that resource officers in the school are the best things that our kids can have. Okay? They see many, many issues with these kids. They see them in, day out. They can see when there's something going on with them. They can pinpoint it, bring it to the guidance counselor so they can talk to the children. Okay? They can see if a kid's depressed the minute they walk in that door because they're not acting themselves. So to me, I don't really care what anybody says. We need those resource officers in school.
But I think if I can just say
Yeah.
one thing, that I think this, that we're doing here today is to really hear what everybody has
Yeah.
to say. We want to validate that, it's not a.
No, it's not about, I'm just saying, I just believe that we need resource officers, because I hear a lot of people keep saying that they're not doing good for the kids.
And
And I just think that, I think they are doing good for the kids. So I just want to make sure everybody knows. And the other thing, we want to have a good police department.
If I can just sort of like bring
Yeah.
us back to why we came.
Yeah, I just want to know that I think that,
Your opinion is really very valuable, and so is, what is your name, ma'am?
Jen.
yeah, her opinion is good too, everybody got an opinion. Like, I got a good opinion. We want to have a good police department, we need a better mayor. Thank God he's gone, hopefully Scott Beebe takes over. So go Scott, thank you.
Thank you so much.
I didn't get to grab this.
Hi, my name is Kate Gardner, and I'm a resident and taxpayer of the city of Plattsburgh, and I have been for 14 years. And I would like to disagree with my actually former neighbor, David, who I know, and say that I disagree with the opinion on resource officers. But first of all, I would like to dovetail on what the former speaker was speaking about. And I'd like to do so in the capacity of my professional life, where I work with City of Plattsburgh police officer. And that relationship has really helped me think of the idea of training and partnership is a real way to forge some of the gaps that we have with the Plattsburgh Police Department currently. In the capacity that I work with a police officer, it is in the arena of domestic abuse, specifically elder abuse in the community. And the training that this police officer has had has really impacted what the former speaker was discussing regarding crisis situations. The training that has been available to him, and much of it has been approved through City Hall when we've attended conferences and conventions to do so that I know that there is support for that. And also in partnership with the Plattsburgh Housing Authority, which Maxine is aware of this police officer who sometimes is embedded in the Plattsburgh Housing Authority buildings, but also is paid to work on elder abuse, primarily financial exploitation in the community. And what I've seen and learned is that training has made a huge difference in the manner in which this police officer deals with victims of elder abuse and also perpetrators and those involved. Viewpoints, opinions, stereotypes, and bigotry has really changed. Ageism, folks from different countries who are often preyed upon and are immigrants. We see a myriad of victims through all demographics. And the training has made a huge difference, so much so that when a call comes into the dispatcher and a random on-duty police officer is sent to take a police report with the crime, we call it crimes, there's a lot of mistakes that are made. And we feel extremely frustrated when this specific officer isn't sent because of the sensitivity training that he has undergone. But besides that, so that's just something that I think is a real nuts and bolts toolkit piece that can be utilized, is I think that from some of the reading that I have done, the idea of bad apple and good apple is really not the way we should be coming at this. But when you start to look at the legality and the law around the idea of protect and serve and the purpose of the police in our society, there really is no guidance. There's no guidance at the highest levels of the land. There's none in the Constitution or the Bill of Rights. So that the police, and some people feel that it does refer to private property, going back to John Locke, but really there's no specific guidance what the purpose of the police in a municipality is for. So I think that there's internal guidance in police departments, but there's no state guidance, no county-wide guidance. I think that it needs to begin with City Hall and the municipality and a task force to make code, to codify the purpose of the police. For instance, again, in domestic violence situations and elder abuse, a tool that we use in our toolkit a lot is orders of protection. However, a lot of times victims do have revisitation or stay away orders don't work because the 40 feet from the home is violated. And when these cases do go to a legal rendering of whether the police officer, and again, we can see this in some of the most recent police cases that have come to light, a police officer isn't actually duty bound to enforce orders of protection. the orders of protection can be made, and family court can decide that that is to be elicited. The judge can decide that, but the police really, there's no actual law that states they have to enforce it. And we can begin at the real local level to codify that type of behavior for the police. Instead of just using, it's almost like a mythical thing, protect and serve. Where does the expression even come from? If you were to ask police officers, they would state that that's their purpose, but there's nothing that really says what the purpose is. Are they to protect property? Are they to prevent a crime? But are they really, is there anything that says in the law of the land in the United States that they must protect people? They do not at this time. But we, as a city, can put that into place. And regarding to the idea of resource officers, my husband is a middle school teacher at the Plattsburgh City School District. And again, I'm probably going to use terminology that some people are really familiar with. I'm personally in agreement with the idea of having resource officers in a school or in a school setting helps to feed the pipeline to prison. And again, if you're familiar with that I'm a believer in that. I see a lot of validity in it. And an interesting thing is happening in Plattsburgh, and I think that it's the elephant in the room. We are becoming more diverse. We are not just, I have to pay a lot of attention to census facts and figures for my job. We are not just a North Country homogeneous white community anymore. We have folks that do not speak English as a first language. We have biracial families. We have African American families. We have folks that are coming from Spanish language countries in Central America and South America. And our makeup as a community is changing, but change is hard because we have been in a very embedded Caucasian, very specific demographic anymore. If you were to walk into the middle school, you would see that beautiful array of color and culture and diversity. On the street that I live, in the West End of Plattsburgh, we have in a row families who can say that they are currently folks from a myriad of countries and religions. We have Muslim families on our street. We have Filipino families on our street. We have several folks and families who are black and white and children who are biracial, and that's in the West End. We don't even need to talk about specific pockets that we traditionally associate with lower economic, fragile income families. So that's another point that I would like to say about the resource officers are not going to be seen as children's friends many times. Finally, I would like to say the idea of training. I am someone who is of the opinion that human service and social workers can be working alongside police officers, and they absolutely can be called to the myriad amount of crisis situations that happen specifically domestically. I know because these folks call my office with the same types of emergencies, and these can escalate. There are people that are at the end of their rope, and often where I work, which is Catholic Charities, we're the end of the line where people are very, very desperate. I think the crisis team has gone a long way, and I think embedding these folks and utilizing that model that is already really successfully seeing a ton of success and embedding them right into the police department would make a huge difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate.
Kate, could I just ask you one kind of clarifying thing? You talk about one of the biggest strengths in regards to the adult population, having an officer who's trained in that modality of being able to handle those sort of situations. If that officer were not to be here tomorrow, do you have faith in the department being able to handle those challenges?
No.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good evening. So I'm Matthew Waite. I think some of you may know me, some of you may not. I have been a public defender in this area for the last 7 years or so. I'm an attorney. I host a podcast called Why Wait Innovate. And I tried to highlight the diversity and innovative nature of Plattsburgh. And I'm really impressed by everyone who's here, and specifically the three speakers who I just heard from. I want to associate myself with all of their comments. I think they were all excellent speakers. I do take exception to Mr. Yoakum's position on SROs. I guess I'll just talk about that briefly. I think you said it perfectly. There's a lot of science on school resource officers, and I think there's a few things that we know for sure. And we know for sure that they lead to more arrests and more people going and getting involved in the criminal justice system. What we don't really see is any success. We have anecdotal studies of people feeling better, and I think Mr. Yoakum is one of those. They feel safer, they feel like there's a better, safer presence at their school. But I think when you look at the data, it just doesn't support the cost that we associate with them. And I'm proud to support Patrick McFarland and some others who voted against continuing the SROs locally, because I do think that, especially when I think both the city and the city school district are looking at extreme budget cuts, when we don't see a lot of benefit to something and we see very tangible negative consequences of things like SROs, I think it makes sense to relook at that. So I want to back up a little bit, because in 2016, 2017, I was one of maybe the only attorney in the area to actually work really solidly at police reform. Specifically, I joined the Spark Coalition and worked on a subcommittee with Ms. Douthit to try to revisit policing and see if we could do what was called law enforcement assisted diversion. I wanted to look for ways to divert resources from the criminal justice system and focus more on health issues, getting people appearance tickets, and essentially just relooking the way that we do law enforcement and trying to make it more of a public health issue rather than a policing issue. And I didn't see a whole lot of success, and the system didn't really seem willing to reform itself then. And I'm glad that we're finally coming to a place today where I think there's an open mind about some of the issues with policing. So at the time, though, we talked about the history of policing, and I think you did a great job in trying to look at both the constitutional origins of policing and kind of the moral backing of policing. And I'm frustrated because I interviewed Sheriff Favreau, and he looks to the sheriff of like in England as kind of the model of the way we should do policing, and they were largely protecting property rights and the such. I think that's a kind of a rose-colored glasses way to approach policing in America, because the history I've been looking at much more roots modern-day policing in the slave patrols in the South, and those slave patrols actually extended north into Massachusetts, Boston area. So my position on policing is I'm honestly an abolish the police person. I think, and the way I say that is, I think as you're speaking, we need to rethink the way that we do policing, and we need to start almost all over again from scratch, because I think that the way that we built policing in this country, it started from the slave patrols, Jim Crow. The 13th Amendment, obviously many of you may have seen Anna DuVernay's 13th. It does a great job of outlining the history of slavery in the United States. And essentially what we did is we shifted slavery into prisons. And then we had slave patrols, and basically we see the evolution of slavery, and we still see it today. I'm still upset when Governor Cuomo has slave labor and we use prison labor in our facilities here in New York State, because what you're doing is you're basically have a captive audience. I don't even want to get into the economic repercussions, but you definitely undercut other salespeople who are trying to make products in that area. You lessen the value of labor in general when you have people who are getting paid 10 cents an hour. But I do think we need to take a deeper look at the history of policing and try to de-romanticize it from what it has been, because even in reading some of the media reports about this, the Press Republican says, pro-public safety people show up in support of a hearing. And it's like, well, what does that make me? Does that make me against public safety because I think we should defund or redivert resources? I think even the way we frame these discussions in many ways puts the reform the police on kind of the outside looking in, and it's very frustrating. And that's why I feel so comforted and welcome here to be speaking to other people and hearing other people's perspectives who are trying to move the needle a little bit, because what are the current strengths of policing in Plattsburgh? I don't see a lot of them. I practiced here a long time, was public defender. I don't see a lot of strengths in policing. I think many oftentimes they're incentivized to charge people, they're incentivized to move very quickly. As far as drug issues, go ahead and charge them with just residue. Why not? Get them on a misdemeanor charge, bring them into court. And it just seems like it's so petty. And instead of focusing on the back end of what happens when you have people who are largely mentally ill and dealing with substance abuse, is you get them acting very, very anxious. They have a lot of issues, and they come out in very negative ways. And so we're spending a lot of money on the back end on policing, but we're not spending a lot of money on the front end of services to provide people, of education, of a lot of these services. And I feel like, in short, we just need a little bit less of policing, and they need to be coming from a different perspective. And honestly, I'd like to see more diversity, and I think we're seeing more of it. More women on the police force, more people of color, different backgrounds. I'd love to see a person from the disability community be brought into the police force. And in general, I just think we need to have a more empathetic approach, and I love your approach of public safety, and think about it more of the shield rather than of the sword, because I feel like in looking at a lot of the trainings that I'm seeing for police officers and reviewing what's happened over the last 40 years and how we've gotten here, is it seems like a lot of the trainings still are very much focused on police officer safety foremost, more than anything. Protect yourself. So they're more apt to grab a gun in a particular situation. And I just see so many cases as a defense attorney that start off really, really small, and then they turn into something so much more, because I can't even tell you. It's the person isn't the most, they're not listening to particular instructions all the time. So sometimes they'll get not just an obstructing government administration charge, but resisting arrest when they're really just giving the officer a hard time. So I feel like officers are incentivized, or if they're not, they're overcharging way too many charges. What do I think we could do to improve policing? I think what we're seeing here today, we need to have a dialogue and a discussion. And I'd like to see I think what I would really like to see, and again, associating myself with the comments before, is I really think we need to have a more comprehensive approach to public health and safety and mental health and substance abuse, to where we do try to triage these immediately, and we try to get mental health and substance abuse professionals in the system or into the equation as soon as possible. Because I do see so many instances where police show up and ultimately things get escalated, where it's, you know what I mean? It just goes from 0 to 60, and I feel like if there were better training, perhaps a professional there who can help them in that instance, I would feel so much more confident about the role of policing, because I've got to tell you, even up until a couple years ago, I'm cross-examining witnesses and police domestic violence situations, and I'm like, so what's your protocol for approaching a domestic violence situation? And they're like, well, we take the call, we show up, and we take a statement. And I said, okay, is that it? Yeah, do you ever have an affirmative, are you ever told to get a statement from both sides to as contemporaneous as possible to kind of see how things line up? And the answer was no. And I thought largely that was a little bit confusing to me, that there isn't, I know they have DIRs, there's an incident report that they fill out, but oftentimes the other person will not even be asked, even if police are there, what do you think, what happened? And it frustrates me. So I think we just need to take a holistic look at policing and start from scratch, and it needs to start with training better officers. I think we need to have a better standardized response. I think we need to bring in professionals who can de-escalate the situation rather than escalate them. And I just think that in general, we need to start looking more at the preventative side of things and working more on education, substance abuse issues. Ultimately, we've got a sick population, and it's sick because they're working too hard, they're not getting paid very much, their standard of living isn't really increasing, and unfortunately what we're seeing is our population is outletting that into drugs and alcohol and a lot of very negative externalities. And I feel like we need to get ahead of these situations before they happen. And I think it just needs to be a discussion and a dialogue, and we need to be a little bit more honest with ourselves about the level of those problems within our communities. I mean, when I was going to Peru High School, I knew drugs and alcohol were around, but it wasn't until years later that I really realized how pervasive it was, because I didn't get into the deep groups who were really into drug abuse. And then when I looked around and I kind of found out what was happening after high school, and I was like, so many squandered lives, so many squandered opportunities, because this community honestly they just didn't see it, or they didn't want to see it. They just ignored the pervasive nature of the substance abuse and alcoholism. And I just feel like we've got to come to terms with both that, and then, looking around and seeing the comments on my NBC5 and the Press Republican, they're horrific. The amount of racism in this community is appalling, and it's absolutely sickening. And I think that we need to all stand up and demand better from our community. Thank you.
Thank you. I just need to ask you one question. Was it my understanding that you said defund the police?
Yes.
Defund the police.
Yeah.
Abolish, he used the word abolish.
I did originally use the term abolish, yes.
Yeah, he did, but I heard defunding also.
Yeah, and again, if you guys want to clarify, there's a pretty healthy body of research on abolish the police.
So we're already 15 minutes past our time, so we've had.
Well, you know what?
She just asked me a question.
I just asked him a question. I think he should be able to answer that.
So we have 2 more people in the room that haven't had an opportunity to speak, and I'd like to give them that opportunity. So sir, would you like?
I would briefly.
Yes.
Hi everyone, thanks for convening this. I think it's a awesome thing that is happening in this community. It's long overdue. My name is Russell Pushak. I live in the city, and I'm a teacher at the middle school. And I just wanted to talk for a minute about school resource officers, because people have really gotten their backs up about this. And I've been in the district for 16 years. We didn't have a school resource officer at one point, then we did, then we didn't, back and forth. The thing that's amazing, no difference. No difference.
With or without?
With or without. The guys that come in, and they've been all guys, are good guys. They're nice guys. They walk around a lot, they talk to kids that like to see cops. It scares some kids. Kids are petrified to see weapons, all these other things. Some kids aren't. But it's not, I don't think it's necessary. I mean, what's necessary is that we address what everyone's been saying here is trauma. Trauma is what leads to all these incidents. In my school, we know the kids that are traumatized. They are the kids that are going to end up sitting in the bad student area, which I have to be there policing often. And they're kids that are troubled. They're the kids that I see in the police reports 5 years later, cooking meth, dealing heroin, beating up somebody, raping somebody. These things, I see these names. I see the kid when they're 11, and then I see them when they're 25, and they're going into the sheriff's office or downtown here. It's really apparent. It's apparent. So I feel so frustrated that if you see these and you say, I know that kid's going to be in the police report, and nothing happens. We have literacy handicaps. We have kids come into our school district. We're 60% poverty, right? 60% qualify for school lunch. It might even be more now. Coming in, they have handicaps already. They can't learn at the same rate as everyone else. They can't do it, and it's not their fault. And the way the education system does it, and now we're just going to test them. Oh, you're behind this, and we're going to do this, and all these other things. It's testing, but no real efforts to increase learning environments in a healthy way are being made. So to me, the school resource officers are nice people. But I don't see it having an impact in lessening those kids that are troubled and traumatized. And that leads them into the drugs and violence further down. And that's where the police have to come in. So I think that we need to look as a city, what is our budget for police? What does this budget compare to other small cities in the state and around the country? And where do these other areas do? You hear what's happened with the militarization of police. And someone just said you saw like an armored vehicle. They don't have those out usually, but I mean, we've got a situation where all of a sudden, after the wars, they had all this military stuff, so they send them out into the communities. I don't want to see us using that. And the studies show that if they show up as riot police, you know, if officers show up in riot gear, there's more likely going to be a riot. It's just the way it is. People aren't talking to each other, you can't talk, you weapons and all that sort of stuff.
So all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail.
Right, and I mean, if you're there talking to a police officer or any other person and they're not with a weapon facing you in hostile clothing or whatever, chances are you can have dialogue. But if a person is that and locked up, it's scary because it's a military-looking situation. So I don't want to see us head that way. I think that education, like my wife was saying with her experiences, education is really where it's at. We have to do it. Citizens review, yes, everywhere that's gone in. I've seen, you know, I've lived in big cities before, and it's always been needed. It's always been needed. The people that are put in the uniforms have tough jobs. I don't feel like they get enough education on it, and the education they do get on it isn't de-escalation usually. And when I see every time across the country, it just tears me apart. High-speed chase. People killed. Innocent people. South Burlington smashed into a car. You're just driving down, a police officer's chasing them. Why are they chasing them? Shoplifting, stolen car, you know, just crazy stuff. People shouldn't die for minor crimes. And that's the situation we're in now. When did it become that if you steal a car, you get to be shot? I mean, what if you steal a car, we know the car's stolen, you probably know who did it. If they run away, you'll get them next week because you know where they're going to be, right? Everyone knows it. You know, but still, officers are putting themselves at risk, and they put everyone else at risk too, in a high-speed chase. The high-speed chase stuff is just crazy. I mean, why are you're going to kill more innocent people than, you know, whatever. It just drives me nuts. So I have to say. And the other thing I want to say about Plattsburgh is unique. We live near the university. So we have a lot of students. I love the students. I love their diversity. I love them here. I like what they do for the town. But they're students, and they're going to party and do dumb things. Now, when you're faced as a homeowner, you got young kids or whatever else, what do? You try talking to them, maybe that'll work, maybe it won't. Maybe it's 4 in the morning and you don't want to talk to them, you just want it to end. So you call the police, but you can't call the university police because it's off campus. Now, the university police supposedly would have better training and know their students better, right? And know all the whole rules. So shouldn't the university police be involved in this? Maybe teaming up with the city police, or better yet, with some young social workers to go and say, I mean, and now it's not so big, it was COVID, you know, it's just shut things, but like, you gotta shut this down or it's gonna, but not just, you know, try to get to it instead of having it escalate, and then you have the scene where you have the kids all on Saturday morning clean up downtown. They drank too much and they're going out picking up litter. And I don't think the picking up the litter thing is any kind of big educational or punitive success situation. So I think that really, we have to look at the city. The university should be interested and committed and involved into taking care of their own students. And pulling in the police, we have to have more police on hand. And they're not dealing with their usual customers. I mean, I think the student customers are different than our local ones in a way, and the training should be a little bit different on that. And the other thing is, I think we need to make this city, town, county, country, whatever, as pro-diversity as possible. We need to show that to people when they drive into this town, that Black Lives Matter, that we're here, we love diversity, it is what makes us stronger, and that we need to show that every way, through hiring. The school district, big school district, 251 employees, I think we have 1 African American. That's it. Our percentage, it's so out of whack with the percentage of students of color to what we have hired, it's not even close. So we have a lot of room for growth and progress, and I think that I'm really happy you people are involved in this, and I hope we can go forward with it. So thank you.
Thank you.
And anybody else?
There's somebody else in here, isn't there?
Yeah, this one.
No, it's one first.
Hi, I'm Shauna Mefford-Kelty, and I teach at the university and I live over on Oak Street and I'm a little soggy right now and I'm sorry for being late. I don't know what's been said before, but my experience with the police in Plattsburgh in the 9 years that I've been here has been in traffic stops and has been, I've only seen police on their feet if I was running in a race and they were helping with traffic. I've never seen a police officer outside of their cruiser unless they're outside someone else's car. Last night on my way to get groceries, state patrol was everywhere, and I know that's not city police, but they were pulling over everybody. And all I could think was, I need to warn people. It's sort of out of hand. And 2 years ago, I don't remember what research I was doing, but looking at the number of police and police type people who live in our area, given our population, is astronomical. When we think about city police versus the sheriff's department and the university police and the state patrol, that's a lot of policing going on. And it's a lot of traffic stops. And a lot of traffic stops that lead to something else. And I remember once when I was on Facebook, I'd posted something about this, that maybe we were in our budget crisis. Not that we're not in a budget.
Our previous one?
Yeah, the last one, you know. And I said, and I'd posted something about, maybe a way to help our budget is to reduce the number of police officers that we have. And then someone that I work with had posted, well, obviously you don't live on the whatever side. And I thought, well, that's a statement that implies that poor people need policed. And I think that attitude is really pervasive. And we also live in an area that is a carceral state inside a carceral state. How many people in this room know a corrections officer? How many of you are related to a corrections officer? Right? It's incredible. And I have friends who are corrections officers, not because they want to be, but because that's the job that will give them benefits, right? And that speaks to a larger issue here as well, in terms of an economically depressed community that tells its community members that the way that you can make money and have a good retirement is to police other people's bodies.
And specific types of bodies.
Yeah, and very specific types of bodies. So I'm with you, abolish the police, but I hold that because I believe that we need to build a community that supports its residents, supports its community members, and finding the ways that we can support as opposed, and it may be through mental health, but I just mean support. Like, oh, did your car break down? Can I help you? Or do you need a ride somewhere? Can I help you? Or hi, I'm Shauna. Who are you? Nice to meet you. And we become neighbors and we know each other. Or we just happen to be in the same community and we know each other. But we take the time to do that rather than assign it to some stranger who's never going to get out of his car unless he's there to arrest someone or give someone a ticket. And I say him because, for the most part, it's male police officers. But, and not that I grew up in like an ideal universe, but I grew up in a really small town in Nebraska, and I knew all 4 police officers. One of them dated my sister once upon a time. It didn't end well for him. But I knew all 4 of them, and they were out, and they were out to know where you were. Like, oh, you're out at the lake? Now I know that in case your parents call looking for them. Or I ran into your mom and I could say, oh, she's out at Lake Helen, right? It wasn't policing, it was making sure you're okay. Are you okay? And I felt that way. It was a really small town, so everybody knew everybody and everybody's business. But that idea of support and making sure that every single person who lives in your community is supported and matters, I think that's the big part of this, and that's the big part of what's missing in policing in general, but particular in our community, that it's a matter of policing bodies and not building a community. Thank you.
If I can just follow up on that was beautiful. But trust too, like when we're talking about showing up with the guy with the crack pipe in the middle of the night, right? Like, can I help you? Have you been to St. Joe's? Do you have a counselor, right? Rather than, here's the charges, misdemeanor, you know what I mean? Oh, what do you have? Do you have more? Oh, who do you know? Trying to shake them down. Oh, maybe if you do this, I can make your charge go away. I mean, we've been running the dirty war on drugs for 40 years rather than the clean war on drugs, where we just try to get leverage on people to flip them, to leverage against them, and we lose the trust. There's no trust. I've been doing this a long time. There's zero trust between most of the community that I deal with and police officers. There's none. And I think in order to bridge this gap, there has to be some level of trust, but in order to do that, the incentive structure can't be built around charges. And we've got this whole system, and we don't want to admit it, judges getting paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. So many judges, so many district attorneys, so many prosecutors. We spend so much money on prosecuting low-level crimes and up, mostly drug crimes. Let's say, what, 40% drug crimes. And what do? We stuff the pockets of wealthy lawyers and of people in law enforcement. And I'm just saying it. I'm flat out saying it because we never had these conversations. Right now.
And I want to say on that note, it is 6 o'clock. We're half an hour over time. So I want us to respect the time of the panel members and the time of our neighbors who showed up to be here. So I want to say to Joanne, to Mary, to Denise, to Shauna, Laura? Jen. I wasn't even close. To them and to everyone else that showed up.
Kate and Matt.
And
Matt there.
Thank you. And we appreciate your time and we also appreciate your perspective.
Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you.
Those were purchased by the previous.
You don't put me.
Most of the time I was like this, just so you know.
I told her today she's quiet and restrained.
Yeah, I moved
She's
out.
listening.
I was resident here for 5 years, but I